Deja vu. Noun. A feeling of already experiencing the present situation. A feeling of deja vu. I suppose you could call it that. There's no other word I can use to describe the sensation. It was like waking up from a trance. Waves of crushing water knocking the breath from my lungs, bringing along the realization that I'd already been through this. What I was seeing, what was blurred in my vision, was red. It was dripping wet and cold on my skin, staining the tips of my fingers. When I risked to look down, it was spattered on the smooth white porcelain of the faucet, droplets spotting the ground at my feet. It was the most mesmerizing shade, one that I could barely believe existed. I love all shades of red. They each bear a part of me, bringing me back to the memories of my childhood, of sticky candy apples glued to a stick and paint staining the tips of my fingers. This one wasn't quite candy apple red, or even finger paint red. The color was sharp, attacking my senses and sending them into overdrive. I took 2 steady breaths and held up my palms in front of me, staring down at the decoration that could be likened to a surgeon's gloves mid-operation. I wasn't wearing gloves though. In my rush, I had stupidly forgotten to put them on, so my hands had paid the price. The girls' bathroom had momentarily become my own personal canvas in my trance, and I was starting to realize that I had made a mistake. Maybe even a suspension level mistake. I wasn't thinking about the possibility of getting suspended, or anything trivial really. I was thinking about how familiar the red had felt on my hands, like it had been there before, and in that so-called before it hadn't been quite so cold, dancing across my fingertips. I could feel it, practically sense it. The red had been warm. It had felt so real, almost like it had belonged, like it was a part of me, slicking my palms sticky and wet. I didn't hear the door to the girls' bathroom open. If I did, I might have had a chance to try ducking into a stall, but instead, I was staring down at the faucet filled to the brim in front of me, red-tinged water lapping around sparkling porcelain. I had to wash off the red. That was my first thought. I had to get it off my hands and fast, and yet my body was still frozen. Part of me liked the way that it painted me. I was its canvas, not just the mirror in the faucet and the marble tiles sticking to my bare soles. Me. I had never grown out of my liking for the color, and that was evident when Mrs. Jarrett had walked in, and I was still frowning at my fingers, which I could have sworn had been painted red before. Miss Jarrett had been my Spanish teacher my freshman year. I had an excuse in my head for her, but glimpsing trails of scarlet dripping down the faucet, as well as my hands which were held in the air, I could understand why she screamed. I could understand why she looked like she was going to faint. I had always wondered what it was like to have red hair. It had been mostly an experiment to see if I suited it, but I had maybe gone a little overboard with the dye. The empty tube was bobbing in the water like a bad joke. Kira Daly, Mrs. Jarrett spoke through her gritted teeth. She had always spoken a mixture of Spanish and English, mostly English in classes, and that hadn't changed 4 years later. It was like being 14 again, learning how to count to 20. ¿Qué diablos estás haciendo? Have you lost your mind? Looking at the teacher's horrified expression, I half wondered if I had in fact lost my mind. I was standing in my bra and jeans, my newly dyed hair hanging in my face. Any slick red between my fingers didn't feel like dye. It felt like something else. Something that I was trying not to think about, because I was sure 2 worlds existed in my head. Reality, the one I was standing in being lectured by my teacher, and somewhere else one that I couldn't reach, where someone's blood covered my hands. There was no way I could explain this to my teacher, that I had been controlled by one singular thought all day. Dye your hair. It was still there, dormant, like a second mind, a second voice bound to mine. At least my stomach had stopped dancing. I had been putting up with my voice all day until the overwhelming urge was almost painful, taking over my spotty mind. It was the first thought that I had woke up to that morning. Dye your hair. It was on my lips and it choked in my throat. I had to swallow it down several times, but it was still there, creeping into every part of me and entangling into every morsel of my being. And it's not like I had spontaneous urges out of nowhere regularly, so I shook it off as sickness. It was like my body was working against me. When I tried to push past it, it only got stronger, until I was grabbing a bottle of my mom's dye from the bathroom and slipping it in my backpack with trembling hands. Everything had seemed to make perfect sense until that morning, until the voice in my head was telling me to dye my hair. I was normal, and then I was being puppeteered by an entity hell-bent on submission. I had been battling nausea until I had taken a dive and used my last period to give myself a makeover. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, I had definitely managed to make myself over. I looked like a Saw victim, riblets of dye trickling down my temple and smudging my hairline, giving Scream Queen Sydney Prescott a run for her money. It's dye. I managed to finally choke out, plucking the empty tube from the basin and waving in the air. I grabbed for my t-shirt that I had dumped in my pack and pulled it on quickly, followed by my jacket. Now that Mrs. Jarrett was with me, and the world seemed a little more clearer, the stink of ammonia started to burn my nose and throat. I was suddenly sickened by the state of myself, the last hour or so a blur in my mind. I remember trying to force down a soggy pasta lunch and falling asleep in English, so hot I got into the girls' bathroom. "I know what it is," Mrs. Jarrett shrieked, after it felt like an eternity of awkward silence. When I had made myself look presentable, I opened my mouth to offer her some kind of explanation, which wasn't that I was losing my mind. And before I could speak, however, she held up her hand. "No, I don't want to hear it. Get your bag and follow me. You're a senior, Kira. I expected this behavior from a child." "Right." I managed to get out, shouldering my backpack. I gestured to the mess, panic twisting my gut. "Should I, This is what we have the janitor for, Kira. However, you will be formally apologizing to him tomorrow." Nodding, I gestured to myself. I should probably clean myself up. Mrs. Jarrett shook her head with a sigh, gesturing me out of the door. "There's no need. I'll be doing that since you clearly do not know how to do it yourself. Now follow me." I did, glaring at my sneakers that I had managed to stain. Following the teacher out into the corridor, I was grateful that the student body was in class. The click-clack of the teacher's heels was a good anchor as I struggled to catch up with her, my thoughts a whirlwind. I was still thinking about the intense red on my hands and that feeling, déjà vu. Why had I had the sensation of it? The pooling, the glistening claret felt familiar. When we had reached her office, Mrs. Jarrett practically dragged me into her bathroom and rinsed my hair, and then scrubbed my forehead with a wire brush until my skin burned. Her hands were rough, yanking and pulling until I was swallowing a cry. The water was boiling hot, and when I tried to pull back, she only dunked my head further over the faucet. It was humiliating, yes, but by the time she had finished, I was mostly free of dye. The fogginess in my mind had mostly dispersed, and I was left with burning cheeks and the intense desire to melt into the floor. Her office was fairly cozy, beanbags in place of chairs, I glimpsed Twitter open on her laptop. She lectured me on the importance of maintaining a good GPA and avoiding detention in a year which was detrimental to college applications. Though her words weren't quite registering as I sat in silence, staring at a framed picture of her cat on her desk. It's not like I didn't care about college. I just wasn't gung-ho about leaving town. I had my eyes set on community college. Weatherby Bay isn't a special town. There's nothing really keeping me here. But that's its charm, at least to me. In fact, I've never left. When I was a kid, I wanted to go on holiday, or at least leave town for the weekend. Mom, however, wasn't too ecstatic. And then she got really sick, so I've been caring for her for most of my life. If I go to community college, I'll be able to care for my mom at the same time. That's the plan, I guess. When my hair was dry, I tried to make my escape, muttering about getting to my last class. But she was insistent that I already missed too much of it and I could make it up in my own time. I was tying my hair into a ponytail when the teacher handed me a salmon-colored piece of paper. 3:30, she said, narrowed eyes flicking to the clock on the wall. Which is in just under 5 minutes' time. If you do not attend, that's an automatic suspension. Do you understand, Kira? Are we going to be having this conversation again? Stuffing the detention slip in my jacket pocket, I shook my head. I wanted to tell her that I had to get home to change Mom's sheets and make sure that she had eaten. But the teacher had a to-the-point firm tone that I couldn't argue with. No, Mrs. Jarrett. After humiliating me a little bit more, I was saved by the bell and made a quick getaway. Apparently, the piece of paper screwed up in my pocket wasn't enough. When I was pushing my way through crowds of kids leaking from classrooms, my phone buzzed, and I pulled it out of my pocket, glancing at the screen. Sure enough, there was a text reminding me, topping my notifications from the school's head office. Detention, 3:30 p.m., Mr. Sims' video room, A136. I found the room easy. I vaguely remembered using video equipment a few years ago for a project that I never finished. When I pushed open the doors, I was greeted to the faint smell of body odor and Axe body spray. That was no doubt an attempt to hide it. There was a guy sitting on the edge of a desk at the front, his feet dangling over the edge, and a girl cross-legged on the floor. When I slumped into a chair, a chuckle caught me off guard. I turned to find the guy's gaze on me, lips pulled into a smile. Did you just get out of the shower? The girl's head snapped up, her high ponytail bobbing. I recognized her as Lizzie Matthews, valedictorian. I think that I had maybe spoken to her twice in my life. Once in kindergarten when I stole her chocolate milk and she yelled at me, and then freshman year when she had offered me a spot on the cheer squad. Lizzie rolled her eyes. Do you have a filter, Felix? She hissed. Her eyes flicked to me. Ignore him. I like it. It's not like he looks any better. Felix, the guy scoffed. I never said that I didn't like it. I was just asking. Well, don't. Lizzie shot back. It's rude. The guy groaned, face planting into his lap. You're so sensitive. Lizzie's eyes sharpened. I'm what? All right. Mr. Sims walked in holding a worn cardboard box and dumped it on the desk, so forcefully that Lizzie jumped up and took a seat, and Felix lifted his head and shuffled back a little. I had never had Mr. Sims, and I was suddenly glad. The guy was intense. I've got work to do, so you guys can help me with the little job that I have. He dug in the box and pulled out a worn case with no cover. This is a VHS tape. We're not stupid, Mr. Sims, Felix said. We know what a VHS tape is. The teacher scoffed. Well, I thought that too, until I found out that the three of you have had quite the afternoon avoiding class. While he spoke, Mr. Sims pulled out different tapes and sorted them into a pile on the desk. turning the cafeteria into your very own private concert despite complaints, engaging in inappropriate behavior with another student in an empty classroom, and my personal favorite, his eyes snapped to me, dyeing your hair in the girls' bathroom, and almost giving the Spanish teacher a canary. He finished, throwing the empty box behind him. It hit the wall, and I wondered if he wanted to do the same to us. This is all behavior that I would expect from a freshman or even a middle schooler, not 3 seniors, one of which happening to be your class valedictorian. None of us spoke. I was pretty sure if we did, he would start throwing the tapes at us. Mr. Sims straightened up. Anyway, like I said, I have video projects to go through. He gestured to the pile of tapes. You're gonna test all these out. It's a simple task. If they work in the player, put it in this pile, and if they don't, then this one. He gestured to both piles. If you need assistance, don't bother, because I'll be in my office. There's a thing called common sense, and I expect you to use it. With a last scowl, the teacher laughed. Not without slamming the door behind him, though. When he was gone, Lizzie jumped up and made her way over to the front desk. Felix, to my surprise, joined her. He grabbed the ancient television and the VHS player at the front of the classroom, pushing it into position. I stuck to Lizzie's side and we went through them. We fell into a routine that the 3 of us stuck to. I was in charge of inserting the tapes and pressing play, and Lizzie and Felix marked the boxes. The tapes were mostly old-school projects and Baywatch episodes, which we found ourselves getting far too into. Lizzie and Felix had started to lose interest maybe half an hour into the task, and Lizzie's attention had turned to her phone, and Felix had started building towers out of the cases. I wasn't really paying attention when I grabbed another case, mindlessly pulling out the tape and inserting it into the machine. The TV static faded onto a bright blue screen, but this time it wasn't Baywatch or some ancient attempt at a zombie movie. This time, I was looking at a TV, with 7 different options displayed in bright white that hurt my eyes. There wasn't a remote for the TV, so I used the buttons on the player. I was going through each option when Lizzie finally noticed, her eyes reflecting galvanic blue. The 2 of them were sitting together, their backs pressed against the wall while I was kneeling. I could understand the first 2, they made sense, and they were made in the past. The last one, however, I couldn't take my eyes off of it. 1. 04/12/1994. 2. 7/10/2004. 3. 1/31/2022. Huh? Felix was frowning at the screen. That last one, isn't it in like a day or 2? Lizzie elbowed him. Well done, genius. He shoved her back. Hey, I was making an observation. His eyes glinted with amusement. What are we gonna die in 7 days? Don't say that, Lizzie hissed. The Grudge scares me. I'm talking about The Ring. Well, they're practically the same movie. Felix's lip curled. Lizzie, remind me to introduce you to Drifting Classroom. Is that a bug? You could say that. The girl looked confused and Felix shot me a knowing smile. It's nothing like The Ring, trust me. In fact, it's actually a cute story. It's just about some kids who get stranded. Oh, you know, like Castaway. The girl curled her lip. I don't trust you. Why? What have I ever done to you? Well, you barfed chocolate cake all over my new dress. Felix's expression crumpled. That was kindergarten. Ignoring the 2 sparring, I selected the first date. The first shot was a high school corridor, grainy and discolored. It wasn't our school, I had noticed. The footage trembled as it delved through kids dressed in light blue denim and funky colored socks. The cameraman wasn't exactly careful with the camera, stumbling their way through the onslaught of kids. The sound was low but coherent. I could make out laughter and chatter from kids flying past in a dizzying deluge. From the way the camera zoomed in and out, its owner was searching for someone. Though it only managed to catch annoyed-looking kids shooting the camera the finger, this went on for a while before the person behind the footage headed down another corridor, with straying students dotted around. The footage shook as the camera holder made their way down the hallway, bumping into a crowd of football guys, before seemingly finding its canvas, or canvases. There was a girl and a guy talking to each other. The girl was pretty with dark red hair framing a heart-shaped face. I expected the camera shot to change, but instead it only intensified, zooming directly into the girl's face. She looked like she was crying and the guy was uncomfortable, like he wanted to console her. The camera zoomed further into the girl's eyes. Through the spotty picture, I could make out tears. "Wow," Felix muttered. "That's a little bit invasive." It didn't take long for the two to notice the camera. The girl folded her arms and opened her locker, digging inside, and the guy made his way over. His expression had lit up, a smile curving on his lips. "Hey, yo, Mikey, are we still hanging tonight?" The guy flashed the camera a grin and Lizzie squeaked. "Don't say it," Felix muttered. "Say what?" she said defensively. "You know what?" Felix shot her a look. "He'll be ancient now." He nudged me. "Right, Kira." I didn't reply, my gaze glued to the screen. "Hey, Tommy," another voice, the person behind the camera. "Where are we meeting again?" "Oh, the old place. And don't tell me you've forgotten. Come on, Mikey, it was our spot as kids." "Oh, yeah." The camera guy, or Mikey, had paused. "Is Poppy coming?" Tommy's expression faltered. Yeah, I think so." "Would you guys break up?" Mikey's voice crackled under static, the picture going fuzzy. Felix let out an exaggerated groan. "Oh, come on, you don't ask a guy that." "Shh," Lizzie hissed. "Yeah," Tommy shrugged on screen, the picture wavering. "I broke up with her." The camera briefly left Tommy's face, going back into the crowd and finding the girl once again. She was leaning against her locker, swiping at her eyes with her fist. It strayed on her for a moment before going back to Tommy. He sighed. "I figured it was for the best, you know. I didn't want to lead her on." "You weren't leading her on," Mikey murmured behind the camera. "You told her the truth, right?" "Sure." Tommy's eyes found the ground, and he ran his hands through his hair. "Of course I did, man." Mikey hummed. "You didn't tell her, did you?" The screen froze on Tommy's expression, and I knew exactly what he was going to say. The footage skipped, exploding into different hues of orange and green before settling on a black screen. At least I thought it was a black screen, until something moved. And then a small light illuminating Tommy's face in the dark. It looked like they were in some sort of cave. Lizzie pointed it out, and I saw that she was right. The footage was grainy, but I could just make out the curved ceiling above, and an alcove both Tommy and Mikey were heading through. Are you sure we should be down here?" Mikey's voice shook slightly. He turned the camera around to clean the lens, and we got a flash of his face. I could only make out sandy-colored hair. The rest of his face was too blurry to make out. "How much further?" "Relax," Tommy chuckled. "We came here all the time as kids. It's just down here." "Well, in the daylight," Mikey said, though I could hear the smile in his voice. "Remember when you fell in that pool?" Tommy laughed. "Yeah, and Poppy pulled me out. I was soaking. Oh, man. Mom grounded me for the rest of the summer. It was still fun. We played those nerdy board games that you're obsessed with." "Okay, I'm gonna pretend that you didn't just say that." Mikey chuckled. Why did you bring Poppy again?" The other boy turned to the camera and pulled a face. "What do you mean? It's our hangout, remember? 3 of us came down here all the time in middle school. He started walking again. I broke up with her, sure, but the 2 of us are still really good friends. You can't screw up that many years of good memories, right? Pops is like my other half. Mikey didn't reply, and the 2 continued, delving into the dark. It got harder to see what was going on. All right. Tommy came to a standstill and turned to face the camera. How's this? He held a flashlight under his face. I was thinking that we could set up here. Poppy's bringing snacks and a blanket. Perfect, Mikey said. The camera didn't move from his face. You look, pretty good. I do. Tommy raised a brow. He reached up and pulled something out of his hair. Even with spiderwebs all over me. Yeah. Mikey's voice was shaking. I didn't know if it was him or the quality. Hey, do you want to go watch a movie sometime? There's a new Tarantino movie that I've been wanting to see for a while. Tommy smirked. You mean like just the 2 of us? Because where I go, Poppy goes. Oh, no, it's okay, Mikey said quickly. You can bring her too. Dude, Tommy rolled his eyes with a grin. I'm playing with you, that sounds fun. Mikey started to speak, though whatever he was going to say was drowned out by a sudden rumbling noise, the camera trembling. The picture went dark, though Tommy and Mikey's voices could still be heard. Holy crap, Tommy was yelling. Come and look at this. Hey, Poppy, don't touch it. More darkness, before a sudden light, a mesmerizing blue light that lit up the cave. The camera and Mikey stumbled back, and he let out a cry before dropping it. An otherworldly screech rang out, and I had to lower the volume. It felt like I was there, like it was crawling in my head too. The camera hit the ground, and the footage violently shaking before going black. But Mikey's cries didn't stop. Tommy, hey, where did you guys go? What was that? Tommy, Poppy. The tape switched to a blinding light, no longer in the dark. This time, we were staring at starched white walls and a matching ceiling. It looked like a classroom, though there were no chairs and no desks. Only one chair, and strapped to it was a disheveled-looking Tommy. He was bent over, his wrists strapped to the arms. His skin was pale, cheeks gaunt, eyes hollow. He wasn't smiling anymore. It looked like he had been drained of his energy, of everything he ever was. A voice startled me, and to my right, Felix and Lizzie let out twin breaths. It's the 14th of October, 1994, and the time is 5:40. The camera zoomed into Tommy and he groaned, stirring in the chair. I recognized that voice. At the sound of the low murmur, Tommy lifted his head, peering through half-lidded eyes. I noticed blood caked under his nostrils. It took a moment for the boy to collect himself before his head snapped around, drinking in the confines of the room. He lunged at the ties, strapping him down with a cry. Mikey, he croaked, wide eyes finding the camera. What's going on? It was Mikey, though his voice was colder. He ignored Tommy, continuing in a low drawl. The subject's name is Thomas Westbrook, 16 years old, a suspected telekinetic, or what I like to call a mover. The subject acquired these abilities from a Cromnia cave several days ago, after suffering flu-like symptoms and throwing up blood. The subject showed signs of precognition and the beginning signs of telekinesis. Further analysis is required. He paused. After being exposed to the entity myself, I have not yet been blessed. I mean cursed with what seem to be abilities courtesy of evil. You're freaking kidding me, Tommy hissed. Is this some kind of sick joke? Oh, that's not important. Tell me what you did in gym. What? He let out a spluttered laugh. Is this about that thing? Because I didn't go near it. I swear I didn't. His lips twisted with pain. Mikey, hey, you know I didn't go near it, right? Mikey sighed. Tommy, just show me what you did. What I did, the boy scoffed. Is this your dad? Let me go. In gym. Mikey spoke through gritted teeth. Tell me what you did yesterday in gym. That was nothing, Tommy grunted. Where's Poppy? Mikey took a step forward and the boy tied to the chair lurched back, his eyes wide. Poppy! The room suddenly shook with the intensity of the boy's cry, and I realized, a shiver sliding down my spine, that he was the one doing it. He was the one playing with the lights as they blinked on and off. When Tommy flexed his fingers under the restraints, there was a cry from behind the camera. A man. Following that, a sickening snapping sound. But the camera didn't leave Tommy's face, his eye movements flicking back and forth, rivulets of red dripping down from his nose and chin. Mikey ignored the flash of intense red pooling at his feet and took another step towards the terrified boy. Hey, this is special effects, right? Felix's shaky voice pulled me back into reality for a moment, but he felt so far away. I couldn't look away. I had the will to turn off the tape and never look at it again, but I didn't. You idiot, Tommy shrieked, followed by what sounded like flesh being torn apart. There was a dull light in his eyes, and it was getting brighter and brighter, the same light from the cave. Something slammed into the camera, but I didn't see what it was. I only saw the light, that intense light taking over the footage. When the tape went black, it took me a disorienting moment to realize that it was finished, but I was already lunging forward and selecting the second date on the blue screen. 7/10/2004. None of us spoke. We just watched it. This time, the room was different. An older-looking Tommy, maybe in his mid-20s, was strapped to a different chair. He looked barely recognizable. Half of his hair had been shaved off, his skin ghostly white, gaunt cheeks and chapped lips that looked like they were trying to speak, trying to mouth words that seemed to die inside of him. His eyes weren't quite in focus, and what looked like hospital scrubs barely clinging onto a skeletal figure that was malnourished. Tommy wasn't alone. Next to him, in the exact same position, was the pretty redhead from the first tape, Poppy. She looked like the shadow of her former self, her red hair and rat tails hanging in her face. I wanted to take notice of how pale she looked, how lifeless and hollow her eyes were, but all I could stare at was her stomach bulging out in front of her. Mikey had been cruel enough to restrict her pregnant belly too, and I felt a wave of nausea twisting my gut into knots. I wanted to kill him. This boy, this man from years ago, I wanted him dead. It's been fun, right? Mikey's voice was older, and I could detect a smile despite his face being hidden. You two have been a great help, but as you can see, we won't be needing you anymore, in let's say maybe 2 months. It's a shame, really. I like talking to you guys just like when we were kids. We were going to go to the movies. Tommy's voice was a whimper. I was going to. He trailed off, the words dripping into nothing. You did this to me, he said, and then he said it again and again and again. You did this to me. You did this to me. You did this to me. You did this. I trusted you. I don't know what I wanted, but you made sense, right? You made sense, so why? The word hung in the air and the screen crackled with static. Why, Mikey? Oh, Thomas, Mikey murmured. Calm down. Poppy didn't move, only whimpering. Poppy. Tommy's voice cracked, his head hanging. How did you do it? Tommy's question hung in my mind for a moment before it made sense and I felt revulsion. I felt like I was going to be sick. Mikey cleared his throat. It's Michael, Thomas, he said. Dr. Weatherby if you want. Dr. Weatherby, Tommy snorted, and some of his old self had returned, even if only for a moment. The room started to shake again, but he looked too weak to fight back. The boy let out a gravelly laugh. How about I rip out your spine, huh, Mikey? Oh wait, you didn't have one to begin with. You're not the one with the power. You're just obsessed with it. If you touch Poppy or the kids, I'll kill you. Huh? Mikey clicked his tongue. You said children. From what I know, Poppy Anderson is pregnant with one child, and don't worry, Poppy is being treated with the utmost care. When he brought her in here to snap you out of it, he sighed. It's not like she's innocent after all. She slaughtered 3 nurses. It was Tommy laughing that time. After all this time, he spat out, you're just the same sniveling freak I took pity on in the playground. His head lifted, and that same light had taken over. I couldn't be afraid of it though. Not when the real monster was standing in front of him. We should have had this conversation when we were 16, so why not now, huh? Since you've been avoiding it. It's jealousy, right? That's what all this boils down to. You just can't stand that you were there too that night, and yet nothing changed with you. You're just the same, unchanged. It must hurt to be ordinary, dude. Tommy cocked his head. Really, I sympathize with you. It won't change, you know. You'll live the rest of your life as an ordinary human, capable of nothing but bringing pain to others, and you'll die the same. How pathetic. Shut up, Mikey said. Oh, now it's coming out, Tommy growled. That's what you're scared of, being ordinary. That seemed to ignite something almost feral in Mikey. Take Miss Anderson, Mikey said quietly as people in white hurried to untie Poppy and pulled her to her feet. She could barely stand up, slumping between 2 guards. She managed a soft cry, but the guards had ignored her, dragging her away. The camera was dropped on the ground and I saw feet striding towards the chair legs. I was going to show you one day, Mikey spoke softly, and I saw a figure in front of Tommy. I saw hands grasp onto what was left of the guy's hair, tugging it so they were face to face, forehead to forehead. Mikey spoke through his teeth, through a sickening grin I could no longer call human. Right before we put you down like a dog, like the devil you are, I'm going to show you what we did to her. And when you see that, Tommy, you'll be begging for me to pull the trigger. That tape ended with Mikey gathering himself and stepping away. The footage exploded into static, but I could make out his voice. I'll see you soon, dude. Congratulations to you both, by the way. I'm not entirely sure why I did what I did next. It was like I was on autopilot, like that morning, when I found myself standing in the girls' bathroom with scarlet hands and the harrowing sensation of deja vu. Felix and Lizzie were silent when I pressed play on the last date. Their eyes were stuck to the screen. 1/29/2022. This time, we were looking at what looked like a hospital room or a doctor's surgery. There was an observation bed and sitting on it in the same pale blue hospital scrubs, this time smeared with red, was Felix. He didn't look like the Felix sitting next to me, the kid with the snarky smile and playful eyes. He looked like a hollowed out version. Felix was sitting or rather swaying on the edge, his bare feet swinging in the air almost childlike. His skin looked thin, almost paper thin. His eyes were dark, barely focused on the camera, though he was squinting like he was struggling to stay awake. Below him was a sharp splatter of deep dark red that made me think of my own hands. Deja vu. The camera panned from Felix to the floor, to the sickening splash of crimson, an amalgamation of limbs, heads I recognized, halos of red and strawberry blonde, expressions of frozen in terror. It was my own dead eyes staring up at the ceiling, my own severed neck entangled with Lizzie's. I was dead. God, someone must have been playing a trick. But no, it was me. I was seeing me. But not just one, multiple. I was seeing many versions of me and Lizzie spewed all over the floor like barf. Someone clapped, once and then again, and then a third time. Felix's head snapped up, but his eyes were still heavy. "What is your name?" That voice, I recognized it. Mikey. Far older version, but the same man. The same sicko in 94 and 04. Felix de Croix. "And what are you?" "I'm a devil," Felix droned. "How good, tell me, Felix. You saw this, didn't you?" "Yes." His voice was deadpan. "I did." Felix, I thought dizzily. Why was he there? Why were we there? "Then answer me this," the man ordered. "What happens next?" Mikey's words hung in the air and it looked like Felix was registering them. Cogs starting to turn in his head. I waited for him to reply. I waited for some kind of explanation to why I was dead on the floor. But there wasn't one. Like a bad joke, the tape exploded in the player and I snapped out of it, snatching these smoking remnants with the sleeves of my jacket. Next to me, Felix and Lizzie didn't move. "Hey!" I waved my hands in front of them, struggling to breathe, struggling to speak. I leaned in close to Felix. Under his breath, tickled my nose. "Felix," I hissed. "Wake up." He did, blinking rapidly, and for a moment his eyes widened, and I recognized panic and fear. I saw that he was ready to start screaming, before his expression relaxed. "Why are you 2 inches from my face?" Lizzie sat up with a grin. "Probably to see if that weird smell is you. It's like old socks." Felix rolled his eyes. "Hey, don't lie," he shot back. "You've had your gym shoes in your bag all day." I had to shake my head to make sure that I wasn't seeing things, hearing things. "The tape," was all that I could whisper. Felix frowned, his eyes going to what was left of the tape that I had managed to salvage. "Oh wow," he laughed. "Okay, this actually wasn't our fault. Can we get in trouble for this?" "The last tape that we just watched." I was on my feet unsteady. Calm when I wasn't calm. "That's 6 days from today and I was. You and I, Lizzie and Felix. He was." I trailed off when I noticed a shadow in the doorway. Lizzie was staring down at her lap and Felix's smile was too big. "All right." Mr. Sims' voice made me jump. "How's it going in here? Are you kids done yet?" Felix stretched and stood up, reaching for his bag. Yeah, I think so." I couldn't speak. I felt like I was going to be sick. The teacher nodded, though his gaze stayed on me. "Kira, are you okay?" "Yeah," I said flatly. "I think I'm coming down with something." He nodded. "All right, well, don't barf in my classroom or you'll be in here tomorrow too." When he left, so did the other two, grabbing their bags. I put the damaged tape between my books and shouldered my backpack, my head spinning. "Kira." The teacher's voice startled me when I was heading down the stairs, my body trembling. "Is everything okay?" I walked faster, and I didn't stop until I was back at home. When I locked my door and turned around, Lizzie and Felix were standing in front of me. When I opened my mouth to speak, he shook his head, his eyes flicking to the ceiling. "Hey, Kira," he said loudly. "Are we still doing that group task? I figured I would make myself comfy. After taking in his words, I nodded shakily. Yeah, I said, yeah, my room is upstairs. Lizzie led the way and then we were in my room. Felix's gaze flicked back and forth before he finally let out a breath. What? I started to say, and he shook his head, pressing a finger to his lips. Not yet. We waited for several moments before he finally nodded. I first noticed back in the classroom, cameras, not just in there, in the hallway too. Kira's hallway, even in the yard if you squint. Nice acting, he nodded at Lizzie, who grabbed a cushion and stuffed her face into it. Felix hummed. Yeah, I was waiting for that reaction. Leaning against the door, he tipped his head back and shut his eyes with a shaky sigh. What the heck did we just watch? I held up the tape. We watch it again. Lizzie shook her head. Are you insane? It's toast. We argued like that for a while. Denial and then acceptance, and the denial again. When the two of them left my house, I had a feeling that I wouldn't be speaking to them the next day. And I was right. I don't know if they're intentionally suppressing what they saw or if it was deliberate. The next day was normal as every other. I hugged my mom a little too tight. Felix didn't look at me in the hallway and Lizzie's smile was for a stranger. They've forgotten. And I remember. I remember that I'm going to die in 5 days. Felix is going to end up in that room, and I'm going to die. It makes me wonder, at the tapes, Tommy, Mikey, and Poppy, what happened in 1994? If we're a part of that too, what the heck is our connection? And if I find it, is there a way to change our fate?